Hello all, welcome to session 9 of Selectors Hub training series. In this session, I'm going to practically show you how Selectors Hub supports customizing of attributes while auto-generating the locators. So let's get started. First of all, let's launch the Chrome browser where the Selectors Hub is already installed. As you can see here, Selectors Hub is already installed in this Chrome browser. Now let's browse a sample application URL, say omai.blogspot.com. On this application page, there is a text area field, guys. Now let's auto-generate different possible locators for this text area field using Selectors Hub. For that, I need to right-click on this text area field and select the inspect option. Then Google Chrome DevTools will appear here. Now select this Selectors Hub option from here. As you can see, Selectors Hub has auto-generated different possible locators for this text area field, as you can see here. Now, what is the context of this session? In this session, I'm going to explain how Selectors Hub supports the customizing of attributes. So how to customize the attributes in Selectors Hub? That's the context, guys. Let me explain. There is an option here, guys. In the Selectors Hub, there is an option here. There are a lot of options on the right side, as you can see. The first option, as you can see, is a set attribute option. You just need to select that. When you select this set attribute, you'll get some extra options in the Selectors Hub where you see a lot of attribute options are mentioned here, right? You can customize the attributes using this extra functionality of the Selectors Hub. So by default, if you observe this relative XPath, the auto-generated relative XPath for this text area field, if you observe, it is using which attribute, guys? It is using ID attribute, right? By default, the auto-generated relative XPath by the Selectors Hub is using which attribute? ID attribute, as you can see here. Okay, but there are several attributes for this text area field. Okay, when I inspect this text area field, this is the HTML code of the text area field, guys. It is showing multiple attributes. You see, apart from ID attribute, we have rows, columns, content, editable, style, like that. Multiple attributes are there, but Selectors Hub is by default using ID attribute. So can we customize these attributes? Yes, we can customize. For example, if you don't want to use ID, you see here by default, relative XPath is auto-generated with this ID attribute. But if you don't want to use ID in this particular XPath, you can uncheck it. You see, ID is not being used. So text area field as ID, if you uncheck ID, so some other parent element class is being used. You see, div of @ class is being used. You can uncheck the class also. You see, it's not using either ID or class in this particular relative XPath. Again, let me check ID and class so that it will choose highest priority, that is ID. Fine. Now, apart from this ID, if you want to use any other attribute in this auto-generated relative XPath, okay, apart from this ID, if you want to specifically use some uh, another attribute in this relative XPath, if you want the Selectors Hub to auto-generate by using some other attribute along with ID attribute, then what to do, guys? In that case, let's say this particular text area field has ID and it also has rows, columns, content editable, right? I'll take one of the additional attribute, that is rows. Okay, if I enter rows here, okay, if I type rows here, rows is the attribute. I am asking Selectors Hub to also use rows attribute while auto generating the relative XPath. The moment I press enter, apart from this ID, rows will be used, guys. You see, rows is mandatorily used in the relative XPath. Press enter. You see, now this relative XPath not only has ID, but mandatorily the rows attribute is being used. Text area rows is equal to, it's not using the ID of the text area field, right? Here you see, the moment I press rows here, it's not using the ID attribute of the text area field. Rather, it is preferring rows attribute of the text area field. Rows is equal to 10 is being used here. Okay, some parent elements ID is being used, but the required elements HTML code, even though it is having ID, it's not using ID, it's using the rows, because this is being given the highest priority. Whatever you type here, whatever the attribute name you type here, that will be considered as a high priority and being used, guys. Like this, guys, we can customize the attributes using the Selectors Hub. Okay, for auto generating the relative XPath, while auto generating the relative XPath using Selectors Hub, we can customize the attributes, whatever the attributes we can, now we want to have in the relative XPath, we can customize. Okay, we can give the priority over the by default attributes, and you can check or uncheck these attributes according to your needs. Fine. So let me clear it out. To turn it off, guys, to turn it off this extra functionality where you can customize attributes, again you need to select this set attribute, it will be gone. Okay, so hope, guys, you understood how to use Selectors Hub for customizing the attributes while auto generating the locators. So that's it, guys. See you in the next video session. Thank you. Bye.